Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name's Kristen Brogdon. I'm Northrop's Director of Artistic and Community Programs, and I am so excited that you're here to join us for a performance preview with Greg Zelek. Greg is our new Northrop organist. He'll be having his first concert on the Northrop organ on September 12th. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's just get started helping our audience get to know you a little bit. Tell us about your background. Tell us how you got here.
Sure. First, I should say it's such a privilege to be the new Northrop organist. I'm so excited about it. My parents are so excited to visit Minneapolis for the first time. My wife and my child are here now for the first time, so it's just a very exciting thing. I grew up in Miami, Florida, originally, and was there all the way through high school, and then I did my undergrad, master's, and artist diploma at Juilliard with Paul Jacobs, who actually rededicated this instrument back in 2018. And so I studied with him over the course of those 8 years. The first 4 were just not enough. I could not get through my academic degrees. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was just such a pleasure to study with such a great performer and such a great teacher. And then in the last year of my artist diploma, I was offered this position as principal organist of the Madison Symphony Orchestra and the curator of the Overture Concert Organ, which is another concert hall instrument also in the Midwest. And that brought me from New York to Madison, Wisconsin. And I always tell the story that my mom and I were driving in a U-Haul from New York to Madison, and we hit Indiana, and it's nothing against Indiana, but I got really nervous that I was not familiar with the Midwest at all. This Miami kid who then lived in New York City was now coming to the Midwest. But I came upon Madison in August, and it was just unbelievable, and I've now been there 7 years, and it's been such a great opportunity. And now to be able to use some of that experience to be able to inform what I do here in this role is just such an exciting opportunity.
Well, I'm curious about what it was that originally drew you to this position, and what are you excited about being able to do here at Northrop with our instrument?
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a unique opportunity, not just to have a concert hall like this one, but also to have an incredible instrument like we have here at Northrop, and then also to have a program that's wanting to showcase this instrument to this Minneapolis audience. And so that was what I thought was so remarkable. I'm very fortunate in Madison that we have that same system. We've got this incredible hall, then we've got this incredible organ, and we have a program that's allowed us to reach so many people with this instrument. And to see that Northrop is so enthusiastic about wanting to do that, and that this community, it seems, has sort of really come forward to support that vision has been a wonderful thing. And I think that there's so much room to grow. I know that there are a million people out there who have not heard the organ and don't think they ever want to hear the organ. My family is a perfect example of those people because I grew up in a non-musical household. But I think the organ's one of those instruments that sort of sells itself. Once you're in the hall and you experience a great performance and an entertaining evening, you think, wow, this kind of has everything that I would want to hear and to see. It's such a virtuosic instrument. It's so visually remarkable, especially in this incredible space. And then, of course, just the different sounds of the instrument. It can be as soft where you're not even sure if the organ's playing, and then loud enough where you absolutely know that it is. And so that excitement of what goes into hearing the instrument played, but then also seeing the performer bring this music to life, I think is a huge draw. So we've just got to get people to come in for the first time, even if they're unfamiliar with the instrument or don't think they're going to be interested. I think once they see the virtuosity that's required to play, they're in for a very entertaining evening.
Well, and you and I have talked about the idea of welcoming in audiences and communities and folks who don't necessarily know the organ. Is there anything that you would want them to know about how the instrument works when they come to the concert?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that you spend a lot of time with the instrument before you actually play the concert. So my dad learned this the hard way because he kept telling me, is like, just sit down and play for people, you know, the way that I would on a piano. And it's not quite the same thing on the organ. You have to spend so many hours setting up what's called your presets, basically, for each individual piece. And every time you play this piece of music, it's so different one instrument from the other. So here at Northrop, I'm going to play repertoire that I've played in the past, but it's going to be so different from any other experience that I myself as the performer has ever had. And so you spend a lot of time figuring out sort of what all these sounds actually sound like in this space, putting them together, and then trying to make these programs as exciting as possible. I think the Northrop organ offers such variety of sound. It's such an eclectic instrument, and it's also very versatile. I'm playing a very a very varied program that I think uses the entire instrument throughout the course of the evening. And so there's a lot of that work beforehand. And then when we come to the concert, it's really just a matter of like the organist seeming as though they're in complete control. And I think there's something very appealing to the audience when you see such virtuosity at work, but the organist seems completely relaxed and like they know exactly what they're doing, even though they've at times only spent a couple hours on the instrument. So that sort of pre-work is something that I don't think most people know about when they actually come to a concert, but it's good to be aware of it, because then I think as you're watching the event and you're seeing all of the different things that I'll be doing in September, you kind of have a sense of, oh, a lot of this was sort of pre-calculated ahead of time, and now he's actually bringing this music to life.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the program, and I'm curious to hear more from you about how you picked the pieces that you wanted to play on this first concert.
Yeah, so I think it's very important to select repertoire that you want to leave a very good first impression, especially the first time you're performing for an audience. So this being the first concert in my role as Northrop organist, I wanted to play a very eclectic program, but that I thought was also appealing not just for folks that have already heard this instrument before, that are already familiar with organ music, but also hopefully a lot of the students here at the university who might be hearing this instrument for the first time, and also just music that I love to play and that I would want to hear as an audience member. I regularly turn to my parents or my wife, again, who are not musicians, in terms of seeing how entertained and how much enjoyment they had over the course of an evening, based on, some of it's the banter that we have with the audience, and then it's also just the music and the selections, and then how it's played. The quality of your playing, I think, also has to come through. People want to see a very high quality program. So in terms of rep, I wanted it to be music, again, that I know that some organists are going to just enjoy hearing again, maybe for the millionth time, and hopefully some people are hearing for the first time, but they're sort of standards of the organ literature, like Widor's first movement of his Sixth Symphony. But then we also have some arrangements. For instance, I'm playing the entire overture to William Tell, which I think a lot of people will be familiar with, even if they don't know it by name, as well as some arrangements of some Cuban pieces. I'm half Cuban. My mom is Cuban. She came from Cuba when she was 4. And I grew up in a very sort of Cuban household in Miami, with my grandparents living just a couple blocks away. So I heard a lot of this music by Ernesto Lecona growing up, and I arranged it for organ. And I think, again, it's music that's very attractive to anyone that'll be here that night.
Well, and I love that we have some of your arrangements on the program. What is it that you like to highlight when you're arranging? Like, what do you love about arranging music?
Yeah, I think what I like specifically is that it requires not just looking at the score of of whatever instrument it was originally written for, but also sort of reimagining it for whatever particular instrument I'll be playing on. And so it's not just that you arrange it one time and then you play it on all these different organs, but the way that I arrange it has a lot to do with the instrument itself and the rest of the program surrounding it. So in terms of volume, texture, sounds, I might use something very different depending on the piece that I played before it and the piece that I played after it. And the beauty of it is I'm the one in control of that, and no one can tell me that what I did was wrong, because I'm the one that arranged it. So there's sort of this luxury of me being the one that gets to share. While I'm not the composer of the piece, I'm sort of sharing this reimagination of it that's so specific to me. And also, certainly with the Cuban pieces, that has some flair that's very much a part of my upbringing, that I don't think you could necessarily put in writing on a score, but you just have to sort of play and sort of dance with that music.
Love the dance reference for our hall. So the other thing that I would love to know more about, I'm a little bit of a process nerd, and so I'm going to ask you about rehearsing and about preparation. Is there a difference for you in preparing something like the Widor compared to preparing Piazzolla or Satie? Like, what goes into that preparation for you?
Yeah, I think certainly my preparation here at the instrument itself is probably the same in terms of my figuring out what sounds work best and what brings the music, as I've mentioned, to life the way that I would like it to. I think of all music that way. So I know that there are some purists who believe that with organ music, if there are certain stops or certain sounds that are requested or written down by the composer, that you must adhere to that. And I've always viewed those as suggestions by these composers. I think of these composers as some of the most creative people in the world, and I can't imagine they would have had this rigidity of having to play it that way when we have an instrument here at Northrop that allows me so much creativity and allows me to bring this music in so many different directions. And why limit it to just what the composer specifically said one had to play it in that manner or in that style? And so I kind of think of arrangements the same way as I think of playing standard repertoire, in that you're always somewhat arranging this music. Obviously, I'm not changing any of the notes or any of the perfection of Bach or anything like that, but how I sort of carried this music from the page and then into the console and then out into our hall really does require a large creative process that's happening many months before I even get here, of just learning the music itself, thinking about what I might eventually want to do. Then, of course, you get to the intro and you think, oh, this actually doesn't work quite as well as I imagined it did, but this works so much better. And so I think as an artist, having the flexibility to change your own mind is a very important part, especially of playing the organ. And then the other thing is just having fun with it. I think my wife loves hearing the bells and whistles on an organ. Do I love hearing bells and whistles on the organ? Maybe not all the time, but she certainly does. And so are there places where I can incorporate that, where I think our audience will enjoy hearing something that does sound quite foreign from what they imagine the organ should sound like? And here at Northrop, there's so much of that, where I think the instrument doesn't at all sound like the perception someone might have of what an organ should sound like. And I think that's such a wonderful thing, because we're in a very different space. It's not a sacred space like a large church. There's an immediacy to the sound here at Northrop. And there's also just the visual element of everyone being able to see the organist on the stage and them being able to sort of command the audience to them, creates for a very exciting evening.
Well, I think that now is a really special time as you're just getting to know the organ really specifically. Are there any surprises that you've run across so far? Any favorite stops? Anything that you have encountered over the course of the first couple of days that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, the biggest thing is what I mentioned earlier, which is the versatility of the instrument. I feel like I could literally play any style of music on this instrument. And the fact that there are no limitations is such a wonderful thing, because my hope and our hope is that we can continue to find creative ways to use this instrument, not just as a solo instrument with classic organ literature, but also with other ensembles and with dancers perhaps, or just other I think of other events that bring people to the hall maybe for that event, and then it brings them to hear the instrument for the first time, and they think, wow, I had no expectations of what the organ should sound like, and I'm totally blown away by it. And that to me is what makes Northrop's instrument so tremendous, is that it's so versatile. I think it can be used in so many different ways. I think it will be used in so many different ways, and it'll just be really fun to make music on it. And I also think the stage sort of lends itself to entertainment, and there's something about that I think in classical music, they've always sort of poo-pooed the idea of classical music and entertainment. And I 100% think they should go together. One should be entertained by the beauty of music, by the virtuosity of the performance. And I think Northrop's instrument, the hall, and then this program now is set up for exactly that, to really entertain our audiences that come through here and experience it at different times throughout the year.
So then I'm just going to follow up a little bit on that, because I asked about your preparation and your process, and I want to hear a little bit more about you as a performer. Is there anything that our audience can expect as they come in that makes a performance distinctly a Greg Zelek performance?
Well, I'm hilarious, so there's that. I think there are a couple things. I play all my programs from memory, which I think from an audience perspective, there's something very appealing to that.
Absolutely.
In that there's almost this sense on the part of the audience of thinking, is he going to make it, right? I mean, there's nothing in front of him. Does he actually know what he's doing? And I think that kind of pressure and adrenaline that I feel when I'm playing, some of the audience feels a little bit too, and that creates some excitement. And I also sort of speak a lot throughout the program more personally. I don't talk so much in a thesis sort of way about the music. I think the music often speaks for itself. If there's something interesting about the composer or the piece, of course I'll mention it. But a lot for me when I interact with the audience is kind of letting them know the inside baseball of what I'm thinking while I'm on stage. And I think especially for people that aren't musicians, like organ is particularly challenging in that with the symphony, people often pick the concerts they want to go to based on the pieces that are being heard. And with organ, unless you're an organist, very few people know a lot of the standard organ literature the way that they would Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So when you program, people don't think, oh my gosh, the first movement of Widor's Sixth Symphony, I have to go hear this. So, but them getting an understanding of what goes into the playing and performing of that music and what I'm thinking while I'm playing and how I sort of brought this music to life, I think makes them feel connected to the music when they're then hearing it. And so I try to do a lot of that just naturally. I also talk a lot about my family. People tend to learn a lot about me personally over the years. Certainly in Madison now, they knew me when I was single, and they knew when my parents would come and visit, and they knew when I was dating Amanda, they knew when I got married, now they know that we have a baby. And hopefully here at Northrop, we can sort of start to share the same thing where people not only come for the great experience, but also because they feel a personal connection with the artists on stage, which I think is what this whole thing is about. What music is all about is that connection between the performer and the audience and sharing this incredible music.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you. And I think that now will be the time in our performance preview when we're going to transition into a little bit of Spanish. So I'm lucky to have a colleague, Noah Bauer, who is Northrop's campus engagement coordinator, who is going to come and ask you some questions on Espanol.
Gracias.